Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. Well, I spent the last week on vacation doing one thing, and that is playing Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is probably one of the best Zelda games ever made, and the most different. Breath of the Wild moves the series forward by going back to its 8-bit roots. Yeah, Breath of the Wild is not some Ocarina of Time clone that is bigger, better, and better than ever. It's actually its own game with a few of the Zelda trappings. Like the original NES game, you're pretty much allowed to go wherever you want in the world. And I mean that. When you wake up at the beginning and see the overworld, every bit of that can be traversed, provided Link's stats and food supplies are enough that he can get there, and it makes the game feel very liberating. I found myself having millions of places I wanted to go, but at the same time going nowhere, and it's a very unique feeling for a game. It had me hooked for at least 50 hours, and I felt like there are still a lot of Hyrule's vast terrain that I have yet to touch. Let's take a look at Zelda Breath of the Wild and see just what makes it so good. Basically, the game's story has you waking up as some sort of amnesiac young knight named Link who wakes up after a long sleep after he hears a voice of a woman calling his name. He wanders out to see a world filled with ruin and meets up with an old man. So, are you going to give me a sword? What are you talking about? You know, it's dangerous to go alone, so here's an unbreakable sword to help protect you. Hyrule now operates on a bring-your-own-weapon policy. Ah, damn it. Anyways, after running through the old man's trials, which are basically the game's very open-ended tutorial section, he eventually reveals himself to be the ghost of the King of Hyrule. I bet you never saw that one coming. No, pretty much everybody who saw the trailer to this game figured it out already. Do me a favor, don't go possessing any small sailboats. It's already been done before. Anyways, he tells me that Hyrule was once a peaceful country, but because their archaeologists had dug up a 10,000-year-old legend about a calamity named Ganon that can reincarnate itself, they'd started preparing. They dug up advanced ancient weapons called Guardians and several giant mechs they called Divine Beasts that they believe were originally built to keep Calamity Ganon at bay. Link here was chosen to wield the Master Sword to protect Zelda. However, when Ganon finally struck, everything went wrong. Ganon took over the mechanical Guardians and the Divine Beast and turned them on Hyrule. Link was mortally wounded and put into a stasis pod to recover from his injuries, while Zelda sealed herself up along with the Calamity in Hyrule Castle, limiting the damage he could cause to the central parts of Hyrule. Anyways, the king gives me the paraglider and instructs me to go see Impa. Now here's the great thing about the game. There is a ton of story and exposition, but you don't have to see it if you don't want to. You can go right to the castle and battle Ganon right from the start. That said, finding Impa reveals their master plan to stop Ganon, which is to re-find and re-dig up these divine beasts, have Link find the Master Sword, and do the whole plan they concocted 100 years ago over again. Let me get this straight. You want me to do the same thing that we tried 100 years ago and flat out failed, the exact same way we did it 100 years ago, and you're somehow expecting different results? Yes, it's the perfect plan! You do know that's the basic definition of insanity, right? Yeah, the basic plot makes very little sense, but I liked what they do with the other ways of telling Hyrule's story, and just some of the ruins you find. Some ancient, like the Temple of Time, which it looks like they dug up looking for those guardians, and other ruins that were obviously destroyed in the calamity that befell Hyrule 100 years ago. As you go about and just see these ruins in this game, you can't help but wonder what this place was like 100 years ago before Ganon destroyed everything. It also solves one of the problems people have with the whole Zelda timeline in the first place. What difference if it's a century or if it's a millennium if people of Hyrule never seem to advance? Why isn't Link fighting Ganon with lasers and nuclear warheads? They solved that one too. Technology seems to ebb and flow in Hyrule, and the idea of lost technology isn't new to the Zelda series. It's there in the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, But here it's fully part of the game's narrative and makes the game feel deeper. The timeline theorists, the plot analyzers, and the cultural study peoples that exist in YouTube's gaming sections are going to have a field day on this game. Which brings us to the gameplay. What does this game play like? Well, it's pretty good. Like I said, it's new. Don't get me wrong, it brings a whole lot of new elements to the table. But at the same time, it goes really old school too. And by that, I mean just like the original Zelda and Dragon Warrior, you have no boundaries on where to go. Well, for the most part, the map does have an end to it, but everywhere else is fair game. There is no falling off into a pit, into a bottomless abyss most of the time. You are free to explore and climb up or climb down mountains. If there's a huge ravine, there's a bottom to it for you to explore. And it's just really liberating, and Hyrule itself is huge. Not only just in the amount of space you can travel, but the fact that you can also climb upwards or backwards. It's just really fun exploring. Of course, you can't just climb mountains though. Link does have stamina, and if he runs out while he's climbing, he falls off the mountain. And to get more stamina, he's going to have to do things like cook meat or make elixirs by catching bugs to increase that stamina. Hunting wildlife and gathering mushrooms and apples is really fun, and just cooking a bunch to see what you get is also very rewarding. So what's the combat like? This could be a turnoff to some gamers. Remember what I said about being able to go anywhere at any time next to Link's climbing ability for scaling cliffs? There's also weapon strength, health, and armor. Like old-fashioned RPGs, you can go anywhere you want at any time. There are no barriers saying you shall not pass until you found the MacGuffins needed. That said, while it is possible to go right to Ganon from near the beginning of the game, you will also find yourself being a bloody mess on the wall if you try to do so, especially with the guardians around the castle who can do one-shot kills if you're not wearing tons of armor and collected plenty of hearts. Also, the enemies can be really hard, so while you can technically do the divine beasts in any order, some areas are way harder than others, and when you wander into an area too soon, oh, does the game let you know it. The enemies can kick the crap out of you really fast, and yes, I quickly realized I do need to change my thinking and realize there is nothing wrong with a strategic retreat and exploring that area later. The problem is sometimes the biggest frustrations and challenges comes with getting to the top of these towers to help fill in the map and give you a handy warp point back to this area point. Kinda nice to have that before you run away with your tail between your legs, and getting to and up some of these is impossible. Granted, later in the game I found that you needed an ability to unlock one of the dungeons called Revali's Gales that let you jump up really high on these towers. Still, just the amount of game overs I got, especially towards the beginning of the game, may make this game more frustrating, especially to those who have gotten used to the more Zelda games being cakewalk when it comes to the combat. Oh, another thing that might make it more frustrating, remember that bring your own weapon joke at the very beginning of the video? It's true, you have to find your own weapons. I found an axe at the beginning of the game, and most enemies carry a weapon or two on them. You can pick these up, and each of them have their own attack and durability ratings. Use one too much and the weapon breaks on you, leaving you to either equip another weapon or scrambling to pick up a fallen enemy's weapon. Now you're probably going, well, I only need to get the Master Sword and then I'll be hunky-dory for the rest of the game. Alright, even acquiring the Blade of Evil's Bane has a few problems. First, you have to have 13 hearts. Kind of mirroring you need to have a certain amount of hearts to acquire a new sword in the original Zelda. Then you have to find the Lost Woods and go through it before the Great Dooku Tree will let you claim the sword from them. Getting to the woods and not having 13 hearts and trying to claim the sword will kill you. That's right, the Master Sword can and will kill you and give you the game over screen for trying to get it too soon. I should have told him that dying while trying to pull up that sword will cause a soul to get stuck in the sword for all eternity, with Fi being his only companion.
Did you know that people feel with their hands?
Anyways, even after you manage to get to the Master Sword, don't think you're now in the not worrying about extra weapons. Its attack power is medium range. It's not awful, but it's not great. If you're going after bigger enemies, you want to find more powerful weapons. On top of that, the sword can quote unquote run out of energy if you use too much of it, much like breaking it makes it unusable for about 20 minutes while it regenerates. I guess using a secret sword used to banish evil to cut down some trees like a lumberjack is kinda misusing it. Who knew? Anyways, managing your sword and your weapons and figuring out which is a good weapon and which to discard or let break is both fun and at the same time a pain in the ass. Finding a special weapon in the treasure chest is great, but you know it's only going to be there a little while before you're looking for a new one because it breaks on you. Because some weapons are reset like the enemies are when the Night of the Blood Moon happens, a mechanic in the game to respawn the enemies and items that appear. But a lot of the good ones aren't, so it always makes you question if I should even be using it when I'm getting my ass kicked, and that does add a layer of needed frustration, unfortunately. So, yeah, some of the critics have points when they said this annoyed them because it annoyed me too. But the go anywhere, do anything feel of the game and finally figuring things out, so just like an old school adventure, does lead to some satisfying feelings, and beating Ganon never felt so good. Another oddity that can sometimes kill the pace is the shrines. You see, there aren't any real dungeons in the game. There are 4 divine beasts that you have to get into, and they act like dungeons, but most of your puzzles come in these mini dungeon shrines you find while out exploring. Completing them gets you a spirit orb that you can trade in for things like stat hearts or stamina increases. The puzzles usually are good, but they sometimes kill the mood of your adventuring. Fortunately, once you find one, you can usually warp back to it with ease, and then complete the challenge and get the spirit orb later. The cel-shaded look of this game is just gorgeous. I love the way this game looks, and I hope future console Zelda games keep this look. My whole problem with cel-shaded Link in the Wind Waker was character design, and not the overall look and feel of his world. Here it does look like a fantasy cartoon, but more out of a Miyazaki movie, which there are tons of reference to Ghibli movies in here, by the way. If the wrecked Guardians don't say Castle in the Sky, I don't know what does. And it's just fun to look at the whole way through and just experience this version of Hyrule. It's a fantasy world and it looks the part with this art style. I love it, and I think this game will age like fine wine with the graphics looking like this. It's just really pretty. Sound-wise, the music is good when it plays, but for the most part, it's more subdued than in past Zelda games. As far as the voice acting goes, it's pretty good. Unfortunately, the only person I was able to record was Zelda, and that's because of the clumsy way Nintendo handles it on the Wii U. I can understand wanting people not to pirate your cutscenes, but Nintendo, I bought a Pro controller to play games like Zelda and maybe Xenoblade if I decide to get the Wii U version of it, just because the controller's battery's life lasts about 50 hours before you have to recharge. Your tablet controller that comes with the console lasts 2 hours, and Zelda is the type of game where I'll probably play more than that. In fact, I sometimes played 4 or 5 hours long. The only way you get to see these cutscenes is through the tablet controller. You have to go through there, and I don't mean the sound just plays through there. You actually have to switch to streaming the whole game through the tablet controller in order to see and hear the cutscenes. Otherwise, they are mute. So instead of watching them on my giant TV on a surround sound system, I have to watch them through the freaking tablet controller. Nintendo, patch this! As far as the actual voice acting goes, it's actually pretty good. It's a shame I wasn't able to capture any of it outside of a few scenes with Zelda. Like I said, it's all mute if I try to run it through my capture device to make videos, and like I said, I gotta watch it on an itty bitty screen with an itty bitty speaker. It does piss me off. Nintendo should know better.
The blood moon rises once again. Please be careful, Link.
Frustrations and shortcomings aside, I can honestly say I really enjoyed The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It was definitely worth the $60 asking price. It's a great way to send the Wii U off properly and give launch to the next generation of consoles with the Switch. It's a very addictive game, and I can't wait to play more of it. It's, like I said, definitely worth the time and money you'll spend on this game. Worth picking up. Just realize it's not perfect. No game ever is. Anyways, this is Tommy the Game Master, thanking you for watching this review. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below, and I'd love to have you as a subscriber and a member of my community.